Hi friends, welcome to WafaStudies YouTube channel. This is part 1 in Azure Synapse Analytics real-time scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to discuss about how we can query our SQL Server database tables from the Spark notebook in Azure Synapse Analytics. So let's assume in real time, I have a database, SQL database, and to that database, I want to connect from my Spark notebook and I want to execute some queries or I want to execute a stored procedure. That is what the requirement. So let's do how to do that in a practical way. So to do that, you need to use something called pyodbc library. In my video, I am going to use the Python language. So that means using the Python code, I want to interact with my SQL, right? So that is the reason we have to rely on this pyodbc library. So this is a Python library that will help you to interact with a SQL database. So let me give you a description or a requirement first. So let me minimize everything, and here I have a management studio. Inside a management studio, I have a database called SQL Server Mahir, and this is a server name, database server name, and there is a the SQL DB Mahir. This is the database name, right? So this database is actually Azure SQL database, which I opened using a SQL Server Management Studio, and there is a table called employees, and when I executed a select query on top of the table, I can see all these 4 employees. So from my Spark notebook, I want to execute the same thing. So I should be able to connect to this SQL database and then execute a query and then see the data. So how to do that? So let me go to my browser where I have already opened my Synapse Analytics workspace, and let me go to development menu, and here I have something called notebook 2. So let me minimize this here and also let me minimize this here. So this notebook is connected with a Spark pool and the default language is Python. So now here, so let me use this pip list command to see what and all the packages or libraries already available on top of this Spark pool. Why I am checking this? Because I have to make sure pyodbc library or package is already available on my Spark pool. If it is not there, then I should install it. But luckily the Spark pools will get it by default. If you scroll down, if you see here, pyodbc library, which helps you to interact with the SQL, will be already available with the Spark pool. So you no need to worry about anything here. So let me delete this command here. So now since that pyodbc package is already installed on the Spark pool, I can directly import it. I can use import then pyodbc, and then inside the pyodbc library there will be something called a driver actually. So driver is the main one that will take the code or take the query from your notebook and go to the database and execute it and give you back the results. So that driver name we will be using in the connection string inside the code. So for that reason, we should be knowing what is the driver first. To know the driver, on top of this pyodbc there is something called drivers function. Let's execute this. This is going to give you the driver name. See, ODBC Driver 17 for SQL Server. This is the driver name. So let me copy this and let me go to Notepad and let me have this in a Notepad for a time being here. So this is the driver name, right? So now what is the code to write to connect with my SQL Server? So to do that, we should be using this pyodbc. Then on top of that pyodbc, this connect function we have to use. To the connect function, we have to supply the full connection string information in a specific format. So what is the format? That format is already available here. Let me copy this here. So let me copy this entire code and then let me paste it here. Now if you closely observe, this is the code or this is the connection string what we have to use when you want to connect with a SQL database with a user ID and password. And if you closely observe, let me add a new cell here. If you closely observe, the server name I added as a variable and the database name equals to database variable, user UID equals to username variable, password equals to password variable. So we have to have a variables created with the same names to hold the server name, database name, user name and also password. So let's use create a server variable in a Python before executing this line of code, and here I should be using my entire server name. So if I go back, so this is the server name of my SQL database. So let me copy this, and if you see the management studio also, it is the same thing. Okay, so let me go back to browser here, and here let me paste server name. So server name variable is ready, so that this value whatever I posted, it will come and replace here automatically. Now database name also we will be needing. So database equals to database name. So let me copy the database name from my management studio. So okay, I entered password already in the above command as a variable, and I entered my correct password also. The same variable I am using it here. Okay, So now server name is ready, database name is ready, user name is ready. Now this entire code is going to create a connection object, and that connection object maybe I want to hold it into a variable called maybe like this cnxn. So inside this variable I want to hold that entire connection object. So let me execute this command first, and then let me execute this command also to create the connection. See, there is some error. Let's wait and see what is the error here. Okay, so the error is related to the driver. It is saying driver 18 is missing. So if you remember, if I go to notepad, we have a driver 17, right? So we should be using a correct driver here. So let me use driver 17 here. Now let me hit shift enter to execute this code. So this is going to establish a connection with my SQL database. Now connection is created. Once the connection is created, on top of this connection object, try to create a cursor object. Using this cursor object only, you have to execute all your queries basically. So let's name it like CUR, and let me execute this by hitting shift enter. Now cursor object is also created. Now here on top of this cursor object there is something called execute function. To this execute function you can pass your SQL queries. So now as I said, I want to execute this select star from employees table. So let me take this and let me paste it here, and let me hit shift enter. So this is going to execute this table select star from table name, and all the result set it is going to store inside the cursor. So now how to take that result from the cursor? For that you can loop through that cursor using a for loop. Here I am doing for every row in cursor, then let's try to print that row as it is without doing anything. Let me hit shift enter and see we are getting all the 4 employees information correctly. If I go back to management studio, that is what even I have it, right? So this is how it works. Maybe let's assume I want to insert something. So let's use the execute function now, and here I want to write an insert query, insert into table. What is my table name? Let me copy my table name from here, insert into table, and into this table values, let's try to insert a 5th employee, and 5th employee name may be like Sarfaraz. Okay, and then gender is maybe male, and then salary is maybe 4,000. So now let's try to execute this and see what will happen. See, command executed successfully, that means insert query executed. Now if I go back and if I execute this self statement here, still I don't see the 5th employee. The reason is execution completed, but after the execution completion we have to commit it on top of that cursor object. So let's use this commit function on top of the cursor object to commit those changes. So now once this commit changes completed, if I go back and if I execute the select query, I should be seeing the 5th employee as well here. Okay, so this is how you can interact with your SQL databases by opening a connection here. As I shown, open a connection using this ODBC library connect function, and then from that connection object create a cursor object, and once the cursor object created, use the execute function to execute your queries or execute your stored procedures, whatever it is. And then if you want to read the data from that cursor, you can loop through that and try to print that information to see that. Or if you want to execute insert also, you can do it, but make sure once the changes applied, you need to make sure to commit those changes. And once your entire job is done, you need to make sure to close that cursor as well, and similarly close the connection object as well. So the connection object whatever you created, right, you need to close that connection object here. So when you are opening a connection, this is where you created a connection object, the same connection object has to be closed as well. So let me hit shift enter now to close the cursor object and connection object. So that's it. So this is how you can, let me go back to presentation. So this is how using this code you can execute or you can connect to your SQL database using the pyodbc library. I hope you got it. I will be sharing this sample code in the description of this video. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get the notification whenever I add videos. Thank you so much.